My name is Chuck Toombs. I'm the founder of Dulce Energy, also known as Oregon Dulce, and we are currently farming, processing, and marketing a seaweed called Dulce in two farms. We have one farm in Bandon, Oregon, and we have a farm in Garibaldi, Oregon. It's a fabulous business, and how I got into this business and where the idea come is also a very interesting story, and I'm glad that you asked because it gives you an indication of where I'm coming from and what I want to do with this business and how I see it relating to bringing living wage jobs to the Oregon coast and creating a valuable industry that's not only high value but sustainable. The idea came as a result of me joining the faculty at Oregon State University in the College of Business. I'm not an academic by trade. I've been in business, sales, and marketing for most of my career. And I've been in with publicly traded companies, privately held companies, companies that have been held, European companies, etc. And I've had a pretty diverse background in consumer products, industrial products, and that sort of thing. And I also had the opportunity to buy and run my own business, which I did for the 10 years, and that was a successful niche manufacturing company, specialty manufacturing company. When I sold that company, I decided that I had the bug that I was interested in teaching because I thought that would be a lot of fun. And I joined the faculty at Oregon State University, and I didn't know much about Oregon State University, even though I've lived in Portland for over 30 years. I sent all my kids to the University of Oregon, and I was dismissive of Oregon State only because I thought it was just like the ag school or something. Anyway, a friend of mine who is a CFO of a large food company in Oregon suggested I go down and check it out because they have a lot of research that's being done. And I took his advice and I went down, and sure enough, I became very excited at the prospect of working at Oregon State University and also teaching a large marketing class in the College of Business because I saw I had the unique ability to create a connection between the research that was going on at the university and how it can be applied into the real world. And that's been a lot of fun. And I've taught over 5,000 students, and it's been a real joy of mine. This particular idea came from one of these adventures into trying to find a technology that existed at Oregon State's campus and using that as the basis for a class structure or a group project structure where we would use that technology and groups would then compete with each other to try to develop the best marketing plan. And then we would have presentations, and then we would have a Shark Tank, and the best winning presentation, would be declared. And that putting that competitive nature into the class structure, I thought, in combining it with the technology, was a great idea. I thought, and ended up being a great idea. So this is where the idea came from. I was actually brand new to the university. I was at a cocktail party with faculty, and I met a guy who was a researcher down at the Hatfield Marine Science Center, which is on the Oregon coast, part of Oregon State University. And I said to him, just like I just said, I was looking for projects and I was looking for technologies that I could use in a classroom setting. And he said, well, I'd be happy to give you a tour of my lab and introduce you to all the other faculty down there. And I said, well, that's great. I said, so I made an appointment with him, and I drove down there, and I toured Hatfield Marine Science Center and saw all the stuff that was going on. And it wasn't until I got to Chris Langdon's lab that I met Chris, and he had been doing quite a bit of research in oysters, and he also was doing research into seaweeds, various seaweeds. And this one in particular that I found growing in his lab had been growing there for about 20 years. And I asked him about this seaweed, and I asked him what's special about this seaweed. And he said, well, this particular seaweed, they isolated. It's a natural seaweed, but they isolated this particular strain, and they started growing in a laboratory setting, and they realized that this one grew a little significantly faster than other types of this same dulse seaweed. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. It grows fast, but this was 5 years ago, so almost 6 years ago, and I certainly had never eaten any seaweed. I didn't. Plant-based proteins had barely even scratched the surface of, just being part of the vegan community and that sort of thing. So I didn't think much of that. But then at the end of his tour, he did mention to me that he had seen this particular seaweed dried being sold at Whole Foods in Portland. And I thought, well, now that seems to be interesting because I didn't know there was a retail market for seaweed. Again, this is 6 years ago. So I drove home to Portland, which is where I live, and I went to Whole Foods, and I found this seaweed, and it had been harvested and had been packaged up by a company called Maine Coast Sea Vegetables, and they were being sold. They were selling this dried seaweed at about $65 a pound. So I went, wait a minute, okay, grows fast, $65 a pound. There's should be a pretty cool market here, something worth developing. So then I called Chris back the next day, and I asked him about the growth rates and the other thing, and I posed this question, which became sort of the famous question was, why can't this be the new kale? Because again, 5 years ago, kale was a fairly hefty trend in the American marketplace, and I was always puzzled by kale because it didn't, my wife would feed it to me, and it really didn't taste any good. And I'm wondering, how did kale get to be so popular? And I was always curious. So I asked him, I said, why can't this be the new kale? And he said, well, you need to talk to Michael Morrissey, who is at the time was the director of the Food Innovation Center in Portland, Oregon. And so I went up and I met Michael, and I pitched him this idea about, why can't this be the new kale? And he liked the idea because it was an Oregon native, it was an Oregon State sort of product. And so that led to getting the first grant that we did, and and I decided at that point to use it as my class project. So the kids were working on coming out with cool products for it. And it wasn't the breakthrough moment became when I took a cooler full of this stuff, because the group had decided at the Food Innovation Center that they thought it would be interesting to see if this product would be good fresh to restaurants. And they said, we've got this guy in town. He's a pretty innovative chef. Name is Vitaly Paley. Let's let him have it. So I took a cooler full of this stuff over to him, and he looked at this, and he looked at it and goes, I don't know what I can do with this. And I said, well, we're just seeing what's the market like and stuff. And so he took it, and I didn't think much of it, and I didn't know whether he was going to use it. And then it was about Thursday night, and a Sunday night he called me back home at my home on my cell phone, and he says, Chuck, I got to get more of this stuff. And I said, why? And he said, because I put some of this in the deep fat fryer in my kitchen and pulled it out, and I tasted it, and it tastes remarkably like bacon. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I had no idea. And he says, yeah. And so, as we worked through with the Food Innovation Center and the grant and stuff, it happened that Oregon State University in July, I think, of 2015, had a press release that Oregon State had discovered a seaweed that tastes like bacon. And of course, that went viral all over the world. We were on the Today Show, and Al Roker was feeding this stuff. And I thought, well, this is quite interesting as a new faculty member that we would have this much impact in this short period of time. But as I got deeper into this, and I got to know the Oregon coast much deeper, and I realized that this could potentially be a product that could bring back all the lost, lumber jobs that were taken away in the 80s. And oh, by the way, for every 5 pounds it grows, it eats a pound of carbon dioxide. And I thought, well, that's an addition. We could create products from this thing, and we could move it. So that's why that motivated me to start the company. And when I came home one night and I told my wife, I said, I want to get in the seaweed farming business. She shrugged her shoulders and said, well, let's see what that does. So that's how I started the company, and I started it with a fella that worked at it about a year, and one of the hardest things was trying to find access to seawater because this stuff grew in reciprocating tanks on land, and I wanted to duplicate the technology they were doing in the lab. And it was difficult on the Oregon coast to find just access to seawater that people would allow us to do. So I was fortunate enough because I developed a relationship with some of the people at the state of Oregon and Oregon Department of Agriculture, and they were excited. And I met a fellow who was now my partner, Jason Bush, and he still is the director of the Oregon Wave Energy Trust. And he spent many years going around trying to get the world understanding wave energy and how it works, and and as a result of that, he was very skilled in dealing with port authorities and port properties, and he was very, very helpful in giving us the ability to get access to water and meeting the right people, and that's how we started, and we got our first farm and band in Oregon. And so I'm the sales marketing guy. He's the operations guy. As far as experience and as far as that goes, we were both new to seaweed, but again, he was operations and I was sales and marketing. And again, as I mentioned, the biggest hurdle has been actually just scaling the product, getting the water out. But now that we have two facilities on the Oregon coast, the state at least is waking up to this whole idea of aquaculture in seaweed, and creating products from this. And then you fast forward as we're trying to put new products in. We came out with a salad dressing that we tested at one of the local grocery stores that worked. And it wasn't until maybe about a year and a half ago that this plant-based protein idea or the trend began to heat up. And we made some contacts, and we've been very successful because, of course, if you look at dulse and it's 20% protein, and if you could successfully extract the protein from the dulse and you could scale the operation, you could potentially have a very well sustainable protein that could be used in all this plant-based protein. So that's really how we got interested. We got the business going. We want to scale it, and that's where we at. And I also said, you asked the favorite cooking or food hack. That's really an interesting question because one of the people that I met along the way, who's actually on my board of advisors now, is Bob McGoran, who was the head of the food science department at Oregon State University. And one of the days over beer, we're talking about dulse as food and this sort of thing. And I asked him, I said, what's the secret of taste? Because I didn't know. And he looked at me over a glass of beer and he went, fat, acid, and salt. And I went, you're kidding me. And he goes, yeah, because he had spent 20 years with Kraft and he knew all about how to combine those three elements to create taste. And so forevermore, as I've been in the kitchen, I've looked at what I'm trying to do, and I've been concentrating on the fat, acid, and salt component, and my food life has never, ever been better. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell. And again, there's a lot more that's going on with our company, but this gives you a good idea.